This light tank is one that no one thinks is going to be any good, and that is the Chinese tier 8 light tank leading up to both the 121, which is of course the medium tank, and of course enables you to get towards the WZ132-1, which is the tier 10 light tank for the Chinese line. And in fact, all of these light tanks I had tremendous fun, and considering that this is the one that is going to be the one that you're going to have to play a ton if you want to be able to unlock both of the tier 10s from just one tech tree line essentially up until tier 8 of course, and then it splits off to 2 tier 9s. This is the one you're going to have to play, but trust me, this is the way you want to go. The actual medium tanks leading up to the medium tanks, if that makes sense, is not particularly great, and you're going to find yourself in a bit of a, how should we say, not the greatest of positions playing those medium tanks. They are kind of lackluster, they are not particularly amazing, but the light tanks are a completely different story, which is why I wanted to show them. And I think a lot of people traditionally think about light tanks like the AMX 13105 line, so things like the 1375, the 1390, the Batchet 12T, but in fact these tanks are ones that you can certainly take advantage of, and they offer a little bit of something different to what you traditionally expect from the light tanks, and that is because they follow the Chinese principle, which is basically higher alpha than basically all of the rest of the classes that you'll be playing up against, and that allows you to, you know, dominate the matchmaker and be almost like a super fast medium tank. They have the typical kind of Soviet armor when it comes to having this, you know, fairly strong turrets. For a light tank, it has fairly okay hull armor, and although you're not going to bounce anything that has any substantial amount of penetration, you are going to be able to be pretty solid when it comes to basically all of the other light tanks you'll be facing. You can bounce a few rounds, which can't be said for something like, for example, the HMH AMX 1357. So this one is one of the ones that I found personally to be very, very enjoyable, and hence why I actually went and 3-marked it. I mean, I'm doing it on the way of actually getting the medium and of course the light tank. I mean, I've already got the light tank at this point, but I'm going back to try and get the 121 itself. But you know, it's not a bad grind. I really enjoy playing these tanks, and although they might not be for everyone, as I'm sure, you know, playing a tank that doesn't have an autoloader can be a bit of a problem for a lot of people, this one definitely makes up for it with that fast rate of fire, with the higher alpha, with the speed, because these are super fast. They have a good acceleration as well because of their power to weight ratio, and they also have that high damage output. I mean, I am consistently able to deal, you know, plus 3k damage games in these light tanks, which, you know, at tier 8 3k damage would be pretty decent in most vehicles, whereas, you know, in a tier 8 light tank, you know, you'd probably be looking at around 2000 would be an okay game. I mean, nothing exceptional, but these tanks just seem to be able to have these ridiculous impact that a lot of the other light tanks can't have, and I think it's just the combination of everything that they can provide: the alpha damage, the movement speed, the vision range, the camo, just basically everything about these tanks makes them feel quite powerful. And I mean, even the tier 7 I found very, very strong, and potentially even better than the tier 8 tier for tier, whereas this one, you know, very, very strong still. And it's really about finding yourself in positions where you can play almost like a medium, but also you have that capability of playing like a light tank. You can play like a medium, you can brawl with these things, albeit, you know, if you take a shot you are going to be penned, you are not going to be able to bounce very many rounds, but if you play in such a way that, you know, you're just poking, you're being very supportive to your team, you can still play quite aggressively. And I mean, what you're seeing me do here is draw out the opponents to try and YOLO, to try and find the cap circle. I'm trying to get rid of the standard B, because the position I want to be is up on that ridge line where I can find the opponents, where I can keep them spotted, and I can keep peppering them in the backside like this IS-6. Now, unfortunately, the I6 is in a bit of a predicament. He's trying to focus with some of the tanks in front of him, but we are just basically plopping rounds into the back of him, which is what this tank does perfectly about. And because of the disparity between your view range and also your camo, you are able to remain undetected quite easily. You can basically leave a lot of the time. You can avoid shells of damage really easily using your speed and of course the concealment, like we were saying, and that allows you to just play completely differently to what you traditionally expect from a light tank. Usually you are predominantly having to deal with you know, maintaining the speed when you're trying to run away or when you're trying to reposition, whereas this can use it whilst also getting damage at the same time. So I feel like these tanks very underrated. Are they the best light tanks for everyone? Probably not, but I think a lot of people undervalue how good these ones can be. And you can see here in this game, I mean, we've picked up slowly 3,600 damage, and it's been fairly easy. I mean, all you have to do is just not get YOLO'd, you have to avoid taking any unnecessary shots, keep yourself alive to the end of the game, because these tanks do get much better as the game goes on. And essentially you can see me here just flying around dealing damage, and unfortunately, because you know, for some reason the cappers decided to cap, we don't get any more damage. But you know, it is what it is, and we pick up 4,155 damage in this game. Not a whole lot of spotting, but you know, the potential was there if we didn't have as many teammates around us who we'd have to share the spotting with. So a good game nonetheless, and let's jump into the next one. And this next one is 2 tiers lower. I mean, as a light tank, typically you're going to be playing in 2 tiers lower. I think you're more likely to be playing in bottom tier in a light tank than any of the other classes. I apologise to the batch at 25T there if you're watching this. I don't know if you will be. I didn't mean to crash. I was probably not paying 100% attention, but my apologies. But what we do in a top tier game is just not do anything stupid. The key thing that we do here is we spot the enemy light tanks who are just for some reason YOLOing. Unfortunately, we do actually manage to make a bit of a misplay there by crashing into a giant rock. I mean, who would want to do that? But we do get half of the assistance on the light tank, the EBR-90, who's YOLOing in. He didn't actually initially spot us until he got so close that it was almost impossible for him not to spot us. So you do have that difference in view range across some of the other vehicles in the game. I think probably these tanks have slightly more view range versus concealment than some of the light tanks from the French tank line, and you have the speed to really keep up to speed, whereas some of the other vehicles, things like the Vanguard, which is the ELC Even 90 or like a skinned version of the tier 8 premium light tank, that tank is very slow to get up to top speed. This and the Chinese light tanks, absolutely not. And I think my main point in making this video was to shine a light on these vehicles, as that you don't always have to play these super meta tanks, and regardless of what people say, you can play any tank in the game and do really well. I mean, I've been playing the AMX-65T, which is the French tier 8 heavy tank, which is, for all intents and purposes, supposedly a terrible vehicle, but you know, I'm doing 5k a game, 4k a game, 3k very easily in that tank, and it's really about your own skill level, your understanding of the tanks you're playing. And as much as I want to say, you know, if you just play these tanks, you're going to be super overpowered, people always credit, you know, oh, it's because you're playing an overpowered tank, or oh, it's because you use premium rounds, or oh, it's something else other than the fact that I can't be asked to learn the game, which is probably 90% of people. Like, when most of the time, you know, even people that are complaining about teams can be terrible, right, 90% of the time. But if you do 200 damage in a game, you probably did something wrong. And that is the be all and end all, to be honest with you. I have games I do 0 damage occasionally. I have games where I do 400 damage. That's on me. That is not my team. And I feel like with a lot of the tanks in the game, people feel like they always have to play these like super OP tanks. I mean, case in point, the Turan right here. But you don't always have to do that. You just have to have an understanding of the game. And you know, even if you accept you are playing in a worse tank than some people, it's actually really rewarding when you have good games and when you outplay people in overpowered tanks. I mean, that is literally what I enjoy the most about playing on World of Tanks. I don't enjoy playing in these super OP vehicles because, you know, when you have an amazing game, you get the people going, oh, you're in an OP tank. the only reason you did good is because you're in an OP tank, regardless of the fact that, you know, you've dealt what, 4 or 5 times the amount of damage than you have actually taken, or whatever it might be. My point is that, you know, there's a ton of reasons why I feel like playing in some of these sorts of tanks is very good for players. It also exposes yourself to not being kind of as how do I say, like, YOLOable. I mean, like, you are more YOLOable in this tank, and by that I mean, like, people will just go in after you because they think you're in a terrible tank. I mean, comparatively, if you're playing in like some broken autoloader or something, people won't YOLO you. You've got a little bit more of a kind of a way of kind of combating these kind of engagements that you otherwise wouldn't see, and you often end up not learning how to play the game as well when you're just playing the best tanks in the game, which is why I've always tried to play some of the more or less OP vehicles or less kind of dominant tanks in the game, because you open yourself up to having to learn the core mechanics of the game, not just playing a tank, but kind of makes you get away with a lot within the game, and I think a lot of people could definitely benefit from that. And yeah, if you're watching this and you're wondering, like, why am I doing less damage, how do I actually improve, and to be honest with you, my main tip would just be that you just have to play tanks that aren't super OP. You have to give yourself the opportunity to, you know, die a few times. I have died countless times, and I have died trying to push into stupid spots. I've made bad mistakes, and in a tank like this you get punished super hard. I mean, this play right here, it was risky, but if you don't make the risky plays when the team are starting to just throw, then you really do end up just losing the game anyway. So you know, sometimes you have to take the risks, and if you aren't in engagements where, you know, you can find a lot of people to play up against, then you will find yourself just doing bad. And you don't learn, you don't get into engagements that are going to be able to be experienced for you. And I feel like this is a good tank line to actually play. It's kind of one of those ones that you'll find will improve your gameplay, and I think light tanks actually do a fantastic way of learning the game for yourself, and you'll be able to gain a lot of experience from playing tanks like this. And you can see here we're just trying to get the chisel. And this game, it's not a perfect one. I haven't done the most damage I've ever dealt in this tank. I've certainly not got the most XP that I've ever had in this tank. But I felt like these 2 replays kind of show that you can play in your own playstyle in these sorts of vehicles. You can see here we are trying to spot for the team. We've got a lot of teammates still in one square, which in World of Tanks is a terrible idea. If you start losing map control, if you start making plays where you're opening yourself up to like tons of opponents just taking all of the good positions, if you're staying in one spot, you are more likely just going to lose the game. They're going to surround you, they're going to find loads of different angles, and you're not going to be able to kind of spread yourself out to spot opponents and stuff like that. They're going to be the ones that are going to spot you. And we do manage to get hit here on the chisel there, which is nice, and essentially we want to get rid of him. He's got 2 marks, he hits us on the move, because or someone hits us on the move. I believe it might have been the enemy WZ132 in the light tank, so yeah, not ideal. But, you know, we take it with a pinch of salt. Sometimes you make a good play, sometimes you don't. We learn from them, and that's what's the most beneficial, how you can get better at World of Tanks. Which I feel like we've lost over the last, like, probably year or so on World of Tanks console with the videos. I feel like I haven't done enough of these. How can you get better? How can you learn the game? What sort of things should you be thinking about? And hopefully we'll be ramping those up. I will do some specific guides as to how you can learn by picking explicit gameplay that, you know, showcases A, when I do bad things, because I do bad things as well, and B, when I do things right, or what's seemingly right at the time. Now, one of these examples is right here. We've got a Foch 155. Now, if we get hit by him, we are gone. So, of course, what I do is go straight in front of his gun line, what I definitely didn't need to do. Now, that tank has a super long intraclip reload, about 5 seconds. We know that because of the stats. I have it in the game. We know how it plays. I go for the tracking shot here to try and track him, keep him in place, and then he can't just YOLO me. But what we do is we then try and flip ourselves, and this is what ends up getting us finalised. The KPZ on the enemy team probably doing what he should be doing, and tries to YOLO me to get me out of the game, because once I'm gone, I can't just run away, I can't circle anyone, I can't find those easy shots of damage, so we end up losing. And this game showcases quite a few errors that I made. And it's predominantly, you know, I went into a position that, you know, was quite far forward. I was hoping our team would help. It didn't work. We had the idea of, you know, coming over. We made a misplay against the Foch. I went in front of him. We could have quite easily been taken out even if we didn't. So I wouldn't have gone forward against him if I was playing it again. And then the final one was I wouldn't have driven into a giant rock at the end, which ended up slowing us down. We couldn't get away. The KPZ then came and finished me off. So, you know, there's tons of different reasons why you have bad games, but certainly, you know, we're able to have good games the majority of the time, and it's all just from learning and experiencing the game, playing a ton of World of Tanks, and just looking at the gameplay, and of course being very critical of yourself. The first thing you should do in a game isn't jump about and rave about how your team were terrible and they lost you the game, especially when you do like no damage, or you know, you've basically done nothing in the game. But instead you should be thinking, what could I have done differently? Where should I have gone? What did they do right? How could I have dealt with it a little bit better? And also, you know, don't just blame it on premium rounds. If premium rounds are so good, load premium rounds. If you think that they're going to suddenly make you into a super unicum, fill your tank with premium rounds, play it for 10 games, and you soon realise that it doesn't do a whole lot. And often, yeah, you might get the extra 1 shot of damage or 2 shots of damage in a game where maybe you would have bounced. But if you're still aiming at not the weak points, if you're still doing things wrong, if you're YOLOing tanks halfway through the game or at the beginning of the game, it ain't going to save you. You still have to be good at the game. It's just that premium rounds help you become, you know, min-max the game so you have the maximum output. You're not bouncing silly rounds and you're able to pen more things than you would if you didn't use them. Same with premium consumables. They are not going to change you from a 48% win rate player to a 60%, and just test it yourself. You can do it in your own gameplay and you'll see that it doesn't make a huge difference. But hopefully this will be one of the starts of how you can learn the game, and I want to go into detail. I'm not trying to berate anyone that complains about the team. I used to do it in the past, and as soon as I realised that this is just not productive, and if I actually want to get better, there's much better ways of doing it than blaming my team. I suddenly went from, you know, 52% to 56% to 59% to 61% or whatever I'm at now, and I don't even look at my stats now. There's literally no point. It's just a case of you know, just trying to play the game as best as I can every single time I join into the battle, and that's what you should be focused on, not anyone else. Only use them as your tools within the game to have your own better game and win every single match that you play. Hopefully that was an overview of some of the most strange vehicles as a light tank, the Chinese light tanks that offer something different, and hopefully gave you an indication as to some of the content that's going to be coming sooner. And if you've watched this far, or if you have any of your own comments that you feel like you want to put in the comment section, I will be reading through them and I'll try and answer as many as I can. Yeah, hopefully you did enjoy this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you want to see a how to get better at World of Tanks video, I will leave one on screen right now, which was quite an old one, but hopefully the tips still stay true to what I would recommend now.